All right, hey, thanks, John. Appreciate that very much. So if you've been around City North very long, you know that the way that all just went is very different. I'm not normally up here this early in the service, but today we've flipped our service completely around for a reason that I'll get to a little bit later. We are today in the second part of a sermon series called This Family. And this is an important series for me to be preaching. It's an important series for our church. If you weren't here last week, I'll get you caught up real quick so you understand what we're doing, because this is a big deal for us here. This series is all about clarifying who we are. It's about clarifying who we are as a church family. It's about our values. And values matter because although values, the word can sound kind of like a corporate thing, fundamentally values are just things that lead to behavior, and then behavior leads to culture. And I won't go deep into that today. I went into it a little bit more last week. But for today, I want you to have the image in your mind that values are like guardrails. Values are things that help keep you on the road that you want to be on, so that if and when you start to drift as an organization, as a church, there's something that'll help prevent you from going off the side of the road where you don't want to be, and will keep you on the road that you have chosen to be on. So last week we talked about our first value, and that is that authenticity is our posture. It was an important value, but all the values are important, because all the values together are what form those guardrails. And today we're going to hit on the second value of our church. But before we do, I want to remind you of one important thing, or tell you of one important thing, and that is that values come from mission. So you can think of it, to use the guardrails analogy, you can think of mission as the destination. That's not the best analogy, because mission is not a place we arrive, but it is somewhere we're going. And the values then serve as the guardrails to keep us headed that direction. So our mission here comes straight from John chapter 10. The way we say it is we help people find life in Jesus. That is our mission as a church. We help people find life in Jesus. Everything we do as a church is aimed at that goal. It's aimed at that target. It's the roads that we go down, the paths that we walk down are intended to lead us to that. And if it doesn't lead us to that, then we don't do it. That mission is specific to us, but it comes again straight from the Bible, from the book of John, where Jesus says, "The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I come that they may have life and have it to the full." In other words, Jesus said that one of his primary purposes on earth was for his people to experience full, abundant, real life. And so as a church, we just kind of have said, hey, we want to walk down the same road. We want to help people experience and have true, full, abundant life in Christ. And so if Jesus came to give us life, and if we as the church are his body, then the church should be the most life-giving thing that exists on planet Earth. But as most of us know, if you've been in church for any period of time, you have experienced that sometimes church is not that. Sometimes church is the opposite of that. Sometimes church can become life-taking. Church can be exhausting, it can be pressure-filled, it can be output-driven, and it happens because there's this really subtle but powerful shift that some churches make, that every church, to be clear, is tempted to make. And it happens because what we do matters. Like, it matters a lot. We're in the business of trying to help people experience life in Jesus and find a real meaningful relationship with him. We're in the business of the transformation of souls and eternities, and those are high stakes. And so what can sometimes happen in church is those high stakes then push us to focus on like production and acceleration and moving quickly and growth and growth and growth and growth and growth and growth. And when you're in kind of the church leadership world, you hear stuff like that all the time, and it's exciting and it's encouraging. It's like, wow, look at, this church baptized 400 people this year, and then you want to kind of compare, and it's like, well, we didn't, and what can we do to get there though? Because man, we want to see that many people come to Jesus. And the subtle shift that happens is it's not about whether growth is a good thing or a bad thing. It's not about whether attendance or metrics or numbers are good or bad. The temptation is to never slow down because we make the mistake of thinking that visible results mean internal health. And they don't always. In fact, one of the most common phrases that I've heard in church leadership culture over the years is healthy things grow. And on the surface, it sounds right. Healthy things grow, healthy things grow, healthy things grow, healthy things grow. But there are also some really unhealthy things that grow, like weeds or like cancer. And so we shouldn't use visible numbers necessarily as a way to say this is or is not healthy, this is or is not good, this is or is not right. They tell us something, but they only tell part of the story. And in the worst of scenarios, what happens when churches give into this unfortunate drive is that burnout can become really, really prevalent. And many, many church cultures are full of burned out pastors, burned out leaders, burned out volunteers. The church just doesn't feel alive because it isn't. Because the people are barely hanging on. And instead of becoming a life-giving place, churches become life-taking places. And so the question for us then is, how do we fight against it? Because the gravitational pull of churches is toward that. And I know that because I've been in church my whole life. And I've been a part of growing churches, and I've been a part of thriving churches. I've been a part of healthy churches. I've been a part of unhealthy churches. I've been a part of churches that have gotten wrapped up in all that. And I've been a part of churches that would rather just kind of say, well, we're not going to do anything at all because it's easier. I've been a part of churches at every end of the spectrum. I've seen it all. So how do we as a church fight against a culture that its gravitational pull is toward making the church a place where people burn out, where they struggle, and where eventually their life is taken, not given? How do we become a church that nourishes life? How do we create systems and structures that protect and nourish it? So just like last week, we're going to start at the very beginning of the Bible, because this value comes out of this desire to become a church that nourishes and produces abundant life. We're going to start at the beginning of the Bible again, this time in Genesis chapter 2. So even earlier than last week. The very beginning of Genesis 2 is actually the conclusion of Genesis 1. It's kind of broken up a little bit weird. In Genesis 1, we find the account of God creating the heavens and the earth and all that is within. And we find the 6-day narrative, right? On day 1, on day 2, on day 3. And then we get to Genesis 2. And Genesis 2, chapter 1, or Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 starts with this. It says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array." So God has created it all. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day, and he made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. And this is an interesting piece of the story for a lot of reasons. It's another one of those moments in time where I've said this many times over the years, but when there are little details in the Bible that appear to be somewhat unexpected, you should really pay attention to them. Like why did Moses record that God rested and then that he said that this day was holy on the 7th day? It's because God is at the very beginning, he's building in rhythm. He's building in margin to the order of creation. And he says it's holy. In other words, he says it's sacred. Sacred things are things that we treat with utmost respect. They're things that we assign and honor with specific levels of importance. This is a big deal. And it's not only so big a deal that we find it in Genesis 3, it's a big enough deal that God builds it into the rhythms of his people too. In fact, if we fast forward to the book of Exodus chapter 20, we find that Israel has been set free as slaves in Egypt. They're wandering through the wilderness. God has said he's going to lead them to the promised land. And eventually they arrive at the base of a mountain called Sinai. And at that mountain, God does one of the coolest things that he ever does for the nation of Israel. He sends Moses up onto the mountain and he gives Moses rules for his people. Now, not everybody loves rules. I'm a person that likes rules because I like to figure out how to get around the rules. You know? Like, that's the fun of rules for me. How can I just kind of wiggle my way around it? But these rules serve a critically important role. See, for 400 years, God's people have been slaves in the land of Egypt. They've only known brickmaking, hard manual labor. They know how to operate as slaves. They have no idea how to operate as free people in the world, as God's people in the world. And so the rules that God gives, beginning with what we now know as the 10 Commandments, are in many ways God saying, listen, you know how to operate in this one way, but I'm going to give you a new way. I'm going to give you a different way, a way that is freedom and that is life. And so God starts out and he says things like, have no other gods before me. Do not take my name in vain. And then very early on, God says this, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. In other words, God says, one of the commands, one of the rules, one of the top 10 is stop. Stop producing. Stop laboring. Stop toiling. Stop ensuring your own security. Now, for men and women who have been in slavery, they wouldn't have known how to do this. If God had not established as a command to stop, they would have never stopped because their lives had been day after day, day after day, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, making bricks upon bricks upon bricks upon bricks. It's all they knew. God says, stop. It's one of the most important commands. Stop. 1 day a week, no production, no output, no earning, no proving. Why? Because you're no longer slaves. You're not slaves anymore. So you don't need to act like slaves. You don't need to produce like slaves. Free people, God's people, they understand that Sabbath is anti-slavery theology in the most literal sense. Sabbath is a way of saying, I recognize that I am not a slave to anything because I belong to God. He is provider. He is protector, not me. It declares that God is God and I am not. Now, if we fast forward again, and we fast forward about 40 years, God has given this command to Israel, and now they're on the edge of the promised land. They're getting ready to enter it. Moses is getting ready to die and to go to heaven. And so he now gives his final instructions, which are mostly found in the book of Leviticus. And as Moses records these words for the nation of Israel, he reminds them of all that God has said over the years. But after 40 years of wandering through the desert, it's one thing for God to have said, here are the rules 40 years ago. It's another thing to remember them now. And so this is a second recording of the commandments, but in them Moses records something just slightly different. This is what God says to him. Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, that's not where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be in Deuteronomy 5. I was just one look. See, I've got them color-coded. I was just one ahead. It's all good. Deuteronomy 5, that's where we're going to be. All the context I just said still applies, by the way. It's all accurate. I just was reading the wrong verse. Deuteronomy 5, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath day to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. And now Moses reminds them of why. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. It is woven into creation. It is so critical to God. It's critical to him because it is protection not only from behaving like slaves, but returning to slavery. Because the gravitational pull of the human heart is toward production, 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 production. Why? Because then we can trust that we have enough. But God says something radically different. What God says is, I need you to trust not that you can produce enough for yourselves, but that I can produce enough for you. God says, I need you to remember that what it looks like to be a slave is to be driven to produce for your own security. What it looks like to be free is to trust that I am your provider, not you. But it doesn't stop here. There's actually something else that we need to look at that I started to tell you just a minute ago in the book of Leviticus chapter 25. This is what it says there. God is giving instructions to Moses. He says, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord, which is an odd thing to say. The land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years, sow your fields, and for 6 years, prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. Whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, for yourself, your male and female servants, and the hired worker and temporary resident who live among you, as well as for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. Whatever the land produces may be eaten. In other words, the stuff that you tried to grow the year before and where the seed fell and it regrew, you can't eat that, but you can eat whatever just grows. This is a real bad way to build an economy. To be like a really bad way to build an economy. Hey, work real hard for 6 years and on the 7th year, just don't do anything. You'll be all right. So by my nature, I am an extreme non-worrier. Okay? To the point that it's actually kind of concerning. Vanessa just said it's annoying. It's kind of dumb. I worry about virtually nothing. Things I should worry about, I don't. I mean, I don't know how to make myself worry, it's just fixate on the bad that could happen. Well, that sounds like a miserable way to live, so I just don't. To me, I'd probably be like, all right, I mean, that sounds nice, but even I, as a non-worrier, would be like, but hold on a minute, though. Hold on a minute. So how are we going to eat? Because that's pretty important. We're not going to get to year 8 if we don't have the food to live on year 7. Why would the land need to observe a Sabbath? Not just people, but land. For 6 years prune, for 6 years harvest, but the 7th year stop. Why? Because what God wanted to demonstrate to Israel in this moment was that Sabbath was never about just taking time off. Sabbath was never about just stopping. What Sabbath was always about was health. Barren land can't produce well. And if you work the land hard enough, it will become barren over time. The nutrients will be leached out of the ground into the plants. That year of Sabbath for the land, it was a way for the land to regain the health that God created it with. So that then in year 8, it could produce again from a place of health. This is mirrored all across. If you're into gardening at all or things like that, this is mirrored in a lot of ways. I have some berry bushes at my house. I've got some blueberries and some raspberries. And if you go look at my berry bushes right now, they look dead, dead, dead. I mean, they look like sticks. You go outside and look at the trees right now. They look dead. If you didn't know any different, you wouldn't know that there is life teeming inside of those plants. Because what happens in this climate is These particular types of plants, they go dormant during the winter. They aren't dead, but dormancy provides a critical function. During the dormancy phase, the plant gathers all kinds of nutrition and it stores energy so that then when spring hits, it can flourish. It's the same kind of principle that God was getting at with giving the land a Sabbath rest. But beyond that, what God wanted his people to understand in the most critical and significant ways was, look, if you take a rest one day a week, fine. But even at that, as humans, we're going to forget that God's our provider. By God saying, give the land a Sabbath rest once every 7 years for a full year, he was requiring complete and utter dependence on him. Because what he knew is that as long as we depend on ourselves and our ability to produce, we will wear ourselves down. At some point, we will be barren, we will be stripped of health, and we will not be able to flourish in the way he intended us to. And this principle could not more fundamentally go against everything we're raised with as Americans. But it's the way God designed it from the very beginning of creation. Health can't happen when you're barren. It can't. It can only come when the soil is rich. And that leads to our second value. In this family, health is our priority. In this family, health is our priority. So last week, in this family, authenticity is our posture. We posture ourselves with vulnerability toward one another, with authenticity, with genuineness, not trying to pretend that we are something that we're not. And in this family, health is our priority. That doesn't mean we don't value growth. We do. We want to reach more people because there is a world that needs Jesus. Our community is growing every day. It is wild to me how much Sunbury has grown in the last 15 to 20 years. So we value those people. We care about those people. We want to reach those people with the good news of Jesus, let alone Centerburg and Marengo and Johnstown and Westerville and all the surrounding communities. We care about those people. We want to grow for that reason. But what it means is that we will not prioritize growth if it gives us barren soil. We will not prioritize growth if it means that we're going to run on empty to see the results. We will not prioritize growth if it means we're going to run me into the ground or our elders or our trustees or our directional team or our team. We won't run our church into the ground and create barren soil because it's not healthy, and that's not what God desires. Here's how I wrote this in our values doc. We prioritize the spiritual, emotional, and relational health of people and the church over speed, size, or visible success. Growth matters, but only healthy growth. Churches often drift toward measuring success primarily by numbers, momentum, or impact. And when that happens, people are quietly sacrificed on the altar of results. We believe this is neither faithful nor sustainable. Healthy people and healthy systems are how God does lasting work. So we are willing to slow down. We're willing to say no or change direction if something is unhealthy, even if it appears effective. This guards against growth at all costs leadership. This guards against burnout of staff, leaders, and volunteers. This guards against abusive, manipulative, or pressure-driven cultures. This guards against confusing momentum with spiritual fruit. Health is not the enemy of mission. It is the soil that allows mission to endure. And this has profound impact on who we are as a church. But to understand that, I got to read a couple more passages to you. Leviticus 25, this is what we read just a moment ago, but it's a few verses later. As God continues his instruction to the Israelites, he says this, follow my decrees and be careful to obey my laws, and you will live safely in the land. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and live there safely. And now God addresses the elephant in the room. Well, you may ask, what will we eat in the 7th year if we do not plant or harvest our crops? And God says, I gotcha. I got it. Don't you remember? He says, I will send you such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years. Not 2, for 3. While you plant during the 8th year, you will eat from the old crop and will continue to eat from it until the harvest of the 9th year comes in. The land must not be sold permanently because the land is mine. And you reside in my land as foreigners and as strangers. Throughout the land that you hold as a possession, you must provide for the redemption of the land. In other words, this is about obedience. The Sabbath of the land is about obedience, but more than that, it's about stewardship. It's about being trustworthy with what belongs to God that He has trusted us with. The land was never Israel's to exhaust, it was theirs to care for. Sabbath isn't about inactivity. Sabbath is about trusting that God can and will provide beyond what we can. In other words, God's saying, if you obey me and rest, I will provide for you with provision. And this is a huge deal to God, like a big deal. In fact, there's this one tiny little detail hidden in the book of 2 Chronicles that I had never seen before until this week. In 2 Chronicles chapter 36, the chronicler writes this: He carried into exile into Babylon the remnant who escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him. This is King Darius and his successors until the kingdom of Persia came to power. Now look at what 21 says. The land enjoyed its Sabbath rests. All the time of its desolation it rested until the 70 years were completed in fulfillment of the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. Why is that an interesting detail? Because at this point in time, God has driven the Israelites from the land that He had given them into Babylonian exile. And the chronicler writes that when it happened, the land was able to get the rest. The implication being the people had stolen the rest that the land was supposed to be given. In other words, what God did was He said, hey, I told you what to do. You didn't listen. You didn't trust me. You didn't give the land its Sabbath rest, and now I need to give the land its Sabbath rest, and the only way I can do that is if you all aren't here. So get to Babylon so I can let this land rest and recover and recharge and regain the health and the abundance and the fertility that I intended from the beginning. Israel had ignored the Sabbath for years, and so eventually the land got its rest anyway, not because God is cruel, but because God is serious about abundant life. The rhythm He commanded was not symbolic, it was structural. Now, this has huge implications for a local church. And to be real honest, I have spent a significant amount of time this week praying, like, what in the world does this mean? Because I've never seen or heard of a church that attempts to implement Sabbath rest in this sort of way. And I've got to be real honest, I don't have any idea what it means. I've got some ideas. For those of you who know me, I'm real good at ideas. Like, ideas are my world. Now, how those ideas play themselves out in reality, I don't know. What I do know is that if we are going to build a culture, if we are going to build a culture that builds fertile soil, because fertile soil is the only place that life can grow from, then it means we must be intentional about protecting the soil. We must be intentional about building in rhythms of rest, rhythms of purposeful pause, in which we say, hey, the job isn't to produce, the job is to steward what God has entrusted us with. So in this family, even though I don't know what this is going to mean in the long run, what I can tell you is that we will choose healing and wholeness over constant production. We will choose healing and wholeness over constant production. We will not treat production as faithfulness. We will not treat bigger and better services as indicators that things are healthy. We will not make decisions that enable us to go further faster just because further faster looks good. Rather, we will say, how is our church? How are our people? Are they growing in the Lord? Are the fruit of the Spirit growing inside of them? Are they full of life? Or are we running on fumes? Because if we're running on fumes, then we must pause and we must rest. Because healthy soil, fertile soil, can only happen when there are rhythms of rest, of Sabbath built in. Now, that brings us to the big announcement for today. I'm already at time. I apologize. It's all right. It's going to be good. That brings us to the announcement today. I kind of teased last week that there was a big announcement. I do not know what this means for our church long term, to be very clear. I do not. The Lord is stirring some things in my heart and my soul that I'm starting to wonder about, and I'm going to begin some conversations about. But there is one step right now that I know that the Lord has asked us to take. And ultimately it comes down to this, that if our leaders as a church do not model Sabbath rest for our church, then we can never say that we are a church that values Sabbath rest. And that starts with me. And for 10 years, I've not modeled this well for this church. I've been driven and I've gone and I've gone and I've gone and I've gone. And I found myself about 18 months ago in a place where I was on the verge of being done with it all. Because I was tired. I was mentally tired. I was physically tired. I was emotionally tired. See, about 2 years ago, God began to do something that at the time did not feel like a kindness or a grace, but in retrospect now was the greatest kindness that He has ever done to us as a church. God began a process of incredibly painful pruning. It was painful for many of us in this room. It was especially painful for myself and my family. And the pain of that pruning season brought me to a place where I didn't want to do this anymore. But I powered through, because that's what you do. And I kept going and I kept going and I kept going. And then I started to heal. And I was like, all right, I'm good. And then in October of last year, I got some test results back that said I wasn't. And for the first time, when I looked at the numbers on a page, I couldn't ignore the reality that I had not been trusting the Lord with the fruit of this church. I had been trusting me. I had been assuming that the harder I worked, the more I showed up, the more I kept a stoic, strong face, the more I didn't let anybody know how depleted I was, the more the Lord would honor it, the more He would bless it, and the more He would grow us. But that's not what happened. He pruned us. And He took me to a place where I could no longer confront the reality that I was not trusting Him for the provision of this church. I was trusting me. And so it was at that point in time that I approached our elders. And John was up here this morning and explained just briefly. The elders here serve as the spiritual leaders of this church. The elders are the guardrails for our church spiritually. And I approached them and I said, I got these results and I don't know what to do with them. Like I'm okay, but I'm on a road that isn't okay. I'm on a road where in 5 or 10 years, I might end up in the hospital with a heart attack. And I don't want that. And so we came up with a plan that starting in May, I would go on a sabbatical for 10 weeks. If you aren't familiar with what a sabbatical is, it's a rhythm that is common in helping style professions like pastoral ministry, where a leader may go on an extended break, an extended pause, similar to the 7th year. Not with the goal of, well, it can hold all kinds of different goals. I want to be very clear about what the goal is right now in this season in our church, because I'm okay. Praise God. He has brought me health. He's brought me to a place where I'm more excited about ministry than I've been in years and years and years. And a part of me doesn't want to go on a sabbatical because I don't want to be gone for 10 weeks. And I've thought, well, maybe we'll go back some here and there. But that's not what fertile soil demands. The truth is that while God has nearly completed the healing process in my life, there are still wounds. And the more that I trust myself for the provision of this church, the more I disobey what he asked me from the beginning. And so it's time for me to hand the keys over to our elders, to our directional team, for a season, just a season, for 10 weeks, to allow the soil to heal, to allow the soil to become fertile in this place and in my heart again. And so starting in May, right after Mother's Day, my wife and I will be gone for 10 weeks. She said she might come some, I don't know. I'm probably not. And it's not because I don't love this church. It's because I do. And it's because my soul needs to be fertile soil again. And it's because God has positioned us with elders and with directional team members and with trustees who can carry this church well in my absence. And in part, it means that we're going to pause, not Sunday morning services, but we're not going to do new things. We're not going to drive harder. We're just going to enjoy one another for that season. We're going to let the soil here regain some energy and some health so that when I come back in mid-July, we can flourish the way God always intended. To be as clear as I can possibly be, a sabbatical is not a season where, in this case, where I'm exploring what the Lord wants for me. It's not going to be a season where I'm seeking like what's next. I know what's next. What's next is that this church is about to see an explosion of growth, not necessarily in Sunday morning attendance, but in health and in fruit in a way that we have never seen before. Of that I am sure. Of that I am certain. Because as I was preparing for this sermon this week, I got so emotional when I saw that detail. When I started thinking about the 7 years, it's almost to the month that the Lord began to prune us was 7 years. And he said, I will provide for you in the 6th so that you have enough to get to the 9th, and it's exactly what he's done in our case. I'm coming back 2 months before our 10th birthday as a church, and it's going to be the biggest celebration that we have ever had, and I cannot wait for it. And so here's what I want you to know for now. The Lord has positioned us well for this. He has positioned myself for this. He has shown me what we need. He has shown our elders. When I approached them at first, I said, I think I need to take a sabbatical. I think the Lord is revealing that to me. I think I need to heal some. And I said, 4 or 6 weeks, and the elders were like, nope, 10 or 12. And I was like, all right, let's keep it on the short end of that because I'm going to go stir crazy. So we settled on 10. Thank you, Caitlin, John, and Justin, wherever you are up there. Thank you. Thank you to the directional team, to Karina, who is going to shoulder load that she doesn't normally have to while I'm gone, and to Rachel, and to my mom, who's a trustee. I know that when pastors talk about this kind of thing, it depending on your background, depending on your experience with it, it might elicit some nervousness. It might feel like, well, what are we going to do? Like you do so much, and I do, but here's the truth. I've never been the foundation of this church. This is not mine, and it never has been, and it never will be. This is ours. It is God's. He loves you all more than I ever could, and I love you a whole lot. He wants the best for you more than I ever could, and I want the best for you a whole lot. He wants fertile soil here more than I ever could, and I want fertile soil here a whole lot. The growth that I want to see, the fruit that I want us to produce as a church that I have tried for 10 years to force, well, God's the one that was supposed to be producing it all along. And so in this season, we're going to pause and we're going to rest. And I'm going to be absent for a time so that then I can come back and so that then we can continue down the road that the Lord has for us together into greater health, into greater flourishing, into more abundant life than we have ever experienced. I'll be in town, I'll be around, I'm available, text me. I'm going to miss all of you so much. I'm telling you this now because this gives us 3 months so that I'm not just like gone. I'm telling you this now so that the elders and our directional team and our trustees, we're combining all 3 of those teams into one leadership team for sabbatical. They're gonna lead the church together. We're gonna restructure some of our teams. We'll be reaching out. That team will be reaching out in the coming days and weeks with information, and there will be some reshuffling of teams if you serve on teams so that we can position ourselves well, so that when the time comes, I can exit and this church can rest, so that we can rest, so that we can flourish. If you have any questions for me at all, if you're nervous and you're like, Andrew, I just need you to tell me like that you're not going anywhere. If that's you, that's fine. You can worry. I'm not worried. You can ask me. I will tell you to your face. I'll shake you if you need me to. Whatever you need. I'm excited for this season. I am nervous as all get out. Even though I don't worry, I truly am worried. But it's that worry that is the reason why this is necessary. Because the foundation of this church has always been, will always be the Lord. As He has provided, so He will provide. As He has positioned us with strength in our leadership, so He will continue to strengthen it. And we are going to see a season of harvest like we've never seen, a season of abundance like we have never seen before, as our soil heals. Let me pray for us.